Are you listening? Damn.
Welcome to the Rantings of a Fantasy Football Fanatic. I am your host, Jesse Muller, aka JMuller05, and we are streaming right through in our Getting to Know series. I think this is our 9th or 10th episode. Sorry, it's been a blur, so I'm a little lost on it with all the content we've been producing lately. But this is someone who I work with at the League Winners, who goes about their content in a different way, and in particular the video medium, and it stands out. It always catches my eye, so I wanted to kind of bring them on to talk about their process and how they go about like going and making the content they did. So let's bring him on. It's Mr. William Spencer, aka Phinest. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. I am excited to be a part of this. So let's get to it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule because I know you got family, you got kids, you got getting ready for school, doing all that on top of your content. So yeah, thank you for cutting out the time to come on and just chop it up with me for a minute. So why don't let's kick it off by like what drove you to get into the content creation? Where was the moment where you're like, you know what, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring and see what shakes out?
That's part of it. I saw a lot of guys putting out content, and when I started my fantasy football podcast, I wanted to try and branch out into different areas, and video content was something that I really liked. I really liked the aspect of editing content and fitting what you're talking about instead of you just sitting in front of a camera and speaking, because it's informative, but it's kind of dull and it doesn't keep people's attention. So if you mix and match, it really starts to make your content pop. And that was something that I wanted to get into once I started doing fantasy football.
Yeah, I think you've kind of hit on that, the short form video content very well. Like you can fix to your TikToks and all that stuff, right? Like there's a lot of editing that goes into that, and I don't think people realize how much work goes into that. But it definitely pops off and catches attention the way you specifically design your content. Why don't you kind of curious how you go about determining that content you're going to create and where you're like, this is a piece I want to go with?
Well, I'll say I try and break it down to a couple of forms. One thing is current topics. There may be breaking news. There may be something going on with a player. Maybe he's gotten injured. Maybe he's gotten traded. So I always try and shuffle in new or breaking news material as part of my content. And then when it comes to different topics for fantasy football, I always try and use templates to have a baseline for what I want to talk about. So let's say for my schedule, I have maybe 3 rookies I want to talk about. I write down what I want to do for the week, have my scripts ready, and then if I want to break down an individual player, I'll do that. So like I have, I'd start with my favorites first. So I did Jackson Smith and Jigma. I did Darnell Washington that are on my channels, and then I did Quentin Johnston. So those were guys that I really wanted to talk about. So I'll get them done first, and then I'll try and move on to another group and try and have it set up that way.
Awesome. How long, when you go about creating your scripts, how long does it take you to kind of get your scripts to the point where you're ready to kind of put that on camera usually?
So full transparency, I kind of cheat a little bit because I write too. So any content that I write, I don't know if you are familiar with Rum Boys.
Yeah, I know Robbie.
He put me on to a tactic that he does. And I started to try and implement that when I do content. He said on one of his live streams on YouTube, he was like, if you have a ton of content and you're trying to figure out how you can get, or you have written content that you're trying to do, he said, you already have the information there for your script. You just downsize it a little bit, highlight maybe 1 or 2 points if you're doing a minute, like if you're doing a short form content. He's like, your information is right in front of you. You just have to repurpose it to do something different. So that's what I started doing. So whenever I do an article that comes out, I'm thinking of how many bits of information can I get from this article so I can turn into short form.
Well, yeah, that just makes a lot of sense as someone who creates content, right? Like you have it there, and not everyone's going to see this article because it's one form of content, right? It's just written.
That's true.
might as well branch it out. So you hit the video, you hit the audio, you get the written, like you hit it from every angle, and then that way you get more eyeballs on your content because like you want as much people to see your content as possible, right? Because we're putting it out for everybody to take advantage of. So yeah, that's what I've gotten a lot better at over the years. Because like initially I was just doing written content, and I was like, I feel like I'm missing something here. And then I would see you posting those TikToks or on Twitter. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting, and I'd be kind of like dissected in my brain, see how you go about that. Because I think Yeah, of course, yeah. From like a content creator, it's always nice to see what other people are doing.
Yeah,
And right,
and since you brought it up, that's one thing that you can't be afraid of. Like if you see somebody doing something, you're like, man, how did they do that? Shoot them a DM and see what they say. The worst thing, I mean, there's far worse things that people can say, but if they say no or it's some kind of trade secret, that's cool because there are more content creators that are more willing to tell you what's going on as opposed to just keeping everything close to the vest. I've been fortunate enough to be able to talk to, even if it's just brief, talk to people who have gone further or are where I would like to be at. And just a few minutes of their time, they were willing to tell me about how they do things, how they make their rankings, how they make their content, what camera they use, small stuff like that. But I really appreciate just being able to reach out and have that conversation. Even we may not be best of friends or anything like that, but in a space where a lot of people are trying to get on and do their own thing, it's welcoming when you have people that are at the status that they are and they're still willing to communicate with you. I appreciate that.
yeah, I've noticed that in particular. Like for instance, for me, like one time I was just first starting out, I was like, huh, I need to get a microphone, and I don't know that much about sound, so I was like, all right, I'm just diving in. Who knows what happens? So the Rewind CEO shot me a message. She's like, hey, what type of microphone are you looking for? I didn't even talk to him. Like I never met him before, and he was like, hey, let me message you. I was like, here, I'll help you out. What's your budget? And then he like took time out of his day, didn't have to do any of this, and like helped me find the perfect microphone for me. And I was like, dude, I am so
Hmm.
grateful for you doing out of your way to help me out because you don't know me. I'm just some small guy writing content for the league winners or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
it's so nice where people go out of their way to help you. And by the way, like you're talking about, there's so many people in this industry that do. For every like 10 people, 9 out of them, it seems like at least that are willing to at least, if they have the time, help for you. They'll be like, hey, guess
Yeah.
what? What do you need help with? I'll help you. And that's I love it. It's a community in that way. We all
Yeah.
may have our different processes like we're talking about, but like the goal is to help everyone succeed because you help somebody out, they'll be willing to help you back. So it's a win-win for everybody. Like
Yeah.
I
Actually,
love that attitude.
my last guest on my podcast was like that. I didn't even bring it up. I was just trying to. I saw how she does her video content for. She's on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram. Amber Phillips, Lady
Mm-hmm.
Shot Callers. Um, and like almost unprompted, she was like, "Hey, what kind of camera are you using?" And then she told me about who she was working with, how many, what they had and stuff. And she was like, I'll try and see if I can get you one. Like, and I'm like, that's cool. That kind of stuff wins me over because I didn't even ask. I asked her what she uses to make her content, but then she willingly was like, "Yo, if I can get you one, cool. It'll help you out." That's 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 something that I think needs to be brought to attention in the fantasy football community because it's more welcoming than what you see on social media, and you kind of get that you kind of see some dark aspects of the
Mm-hmm.
fantasy football community, but it's not like that. It's always a microcosm. I feel like it's more of a microcosm than it is major. It's a small group that's like, no, this is mine, and I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
share it. But overall, it's way more than that. And just from my experience, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I completely agree. On all my conversations throughout since I've been doing this for a few years now, like the majority of people have been super helpful and beneficial. So it's like anyone that's worried about that, just shoot a message. And the worst thing, like you're saying, they could say no, then you just go on to the next person. It's not a big deal.
Yep.
Like just don't take it personal. It's not a big deal. I was thinking because you hit up different social media platforms, what do you find is the most effective way for promoting your content? And also what makes that your favorite way of promoting the content?
Okay, now I'll be honest. I'm still trying to figure that out because it
Mm-hmm.
feels like every time I do have an understanding of how one social media platform works, they change their algorithm. So it's like it's like starting from ground zero. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really am starting to understand how TikTok works, um, and it's been one of my favorites to be able to get content out, and not only to see the growth on the platform, but to be able to see that the engagement is starting to go up, the views are starting to go up, and just the interaction with my videos is starting to go up. So I really like that aspect because it is a lot of work sometimes to get video content done. But then when you see a particular video that man, I didn't. It took me maybe 2 hours to get this thing done, without a template or anything like that, and then to see it jump up is pretty heartwarming. So
That's
it's so
that's
right now to like boil down your the question or answer. TikTok is probably my second favorite,
okay.
and Twitter is my first one.
Okay. Because you have thousands of followers on multiple platforms. So like you still have a decent reach on those platforms. I was kind of curious which one you preferred more because I see you on both and I wasn't sure like Twitter's more of a written like that. It's still beneficial with the written content, right? And TikTok is much more of the video platform where like everything's a video and some things will blow up on Twitter that necessarily won't blow up on TikTok and vice versa. So
Mm-hmm.
it's and especially like you're talking about with the algorithm when it changes, you just throw your hands up. You're like, I thought I had something here. All right, let's go back, start from scratch. But yeah, it's interesting because like you have this process and you kind of after you work on it enough, you kind of boil it down till you feel what you're comfortable with and what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes you're just like, I know for myself, I'm like, hey, I'll just try something new, see what happens. And then it gets like 5 likes, and then I do this random throwaway tweet and it gets 250, and I'm like,
I never understand that. I'm
I don't
like,
get it.
I'll drop what I feel like is maybe a gem for fantasy football content, and it'll be like, uh, 1,000, maybe 1,000 views, maybe like four,
Mm-hmm.
5, 600, and I'm like, man, I really thought I was putting out information. But if I'm beefing with like Eagles on Twitter, 38,000, 58,000, 100,000. How is this going viral? But the information is not, and it is like I be like flipping my phone on the ground. Like I'm done for the day.
Let's hit on that a bit since you brought it up. You more dive into the team aspect than a lot of people who don't. Like, and for those that don't know, like you're a big Cowboys guy,
Hmm.
and particularly the Eagles are the one that seem to constantly get like the thorn in your side. So I was curious. Do you purposely go about that, or does it kind of just pop up? Or like, you know what, like you let your passion bleed through, or what's your kind of way of crafting your content where it seems like those ones in particular will just shoot up because I think it's the reactions people notice.
Okay, I'll say it again. Full transparency. I'll say it's maybe 60-40. It's 60% is passion. I say 70% is passion, and
Mm-hmm.
then 30% is about like maybe trolling or just trying to get under people's skin because I see it work and I watch other people with their content and or how they tweet,
Yeah.
and it's like, all right, well, if you want to say that, then let me roll up my sleeve real quick, and we going. I'm gonna go right back. So it's kind of that aspect, as far as being a fan and enjoying the rivalry for the Eagles and the Cowboys. So it's more along the lines of that. Um, Sometimes it's purposeful because I'll see things and I'll see people saying things, and I'm like, okay, well, let me get back then. Since I look at it and it feels like they're coming at the Cowboys fans or they're coming at, a player or something like that. So I'll sit back and I'll watch, and then I'll try and figure out what I'm gonna say, and then I'll put it out there. And I'll say, as we get closer to the season, to the start of the
Mm-hmm.
regular season, it starts to pick up. So
Mm-hmm.
in that
Mm-hmm.
aspect, yeah, it's like, okay, you want to take your shot? I'm gonna take mine.
Yeah, the redraft mindset comes in, kicks in, and like all the fans of teams, they're like, "Guess what? I'm back, baby. I took 4 months
Yep.
off, but I'm here." I'm like, "All right, here we go again. I got to deal with 49ers fans for the next 6 months. Like, it's the same thing every time." So I
But
completely
you
get it.
But you know what? I do appreciate the fact that even Eagles fans know that I do fantasy football content, and I'll get messages from them. So it's not like, oh, I hate this guy. He's a Cowboys
Mm-hmm.
fan. He gets on my nerves. And it might be that to some degree, but I'll still get messages like, hey man, look, check out my team. What do you think? Yo, I got the sixth pick in the draft. Who do you think I should go? How do you think I should draft? So I really appreciate even coming from them that they're still willing to deal with me on the fantasy football aspect despite me being a Cowboys fan. So
Right.
I take
That's
that. I take that as a little feather in my cap.
right. That's nice because you see people fighting their bias, where they're like, "Listen, I know I'm a big Eagles fan or a Giants fan or whatever, right?" And they're like, "But you know what? I appreciate what he's doing." So, like on the one end, I don't like the Cowboys, but at the same point, it's like, hey, let me ask them, like, So it's nice to see that from people where they, the passion's there, but they're able to kind of just compartmentalize it and be like, hey, guess what? Like, I appreciate what you're doing. It's
And I
as a
and I
content creator, that's what we love.
Yeah, and I try and preach, man. You cannot be biased when it comes to fantasy football. I may hate the Eagles, but guess what? If I have a chance to draft Jalen Hurts, I will. If I can get Devonta Smith or AJ Brown, whoever, I know that they're going to put up production, so I'm never going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't draft them because they're Eagles." Like that's just stupid. You have to be able to articulate why even players in your own division, if you're a fan of a
Mhm.
certain team, why you should be able to go after these players because they're going to have or they're going to better your chance to be able to win. I'll never put
Well,
anybody in position that they won't draft a player because you're a Bengals fan and you have the Steelers or you have the Ravens in that same division. You shouldn't take any of those players because they're part of your
mhm.
rival. No, that's just stupid.
Yeah, I had well, like we would do home drafts over the years, and like years ago, my buddy was a big Cowboys fan, and he would purposely only take Cowboys, and I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I just love. I'm like, you know, you're not gonna win, right? He's like, what
Nope.
do you mean? I'm like, you can't take 8 guys from the same team. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I get it, you can take a couple, but like, there's got to be a limit. He's like, nah. I'm like, okay, man. He didn't
My
care.
brother-in-law
I was
did
like,
that with the Eagles.
it was just like, oh goodness. Well, the thing about the Eagles last year, you could have like 5 dudes on that team, and you could have won because they were so good. But it's
Yeah,
like
but then you
the
hit the
Scott
bye
Fishbowl
week
thing.
and you have
Mm-hmm.
nobody there. It's like, all right, what do you do then? And then, God forbid, one of them get hurt. Now you got a huge hole in your team, and there's nobody to pick off the waiver wire because you went six deep with Eagles players. Like,
Right. That's
mm-mm.
that gets into the strategy aspect of it a little bit because like some people prefer to just take the L on the bye week and just deal with it instead of spacing it out. Right. So like people could go that route too. But yeah, if you get injured with those key players, you're like, all right, this is it. And I mean it's part of fantasy football. Injuries are bound to happen, and then it gets into the luck and chance and all that stuff. But how do you more fight your bias? Because like I know we like to talk about we don't have a bias, but there is some level of bias we all have, even if we don't want to admit it. So how do you go about like noticing your bias and trying to keep it out of your fantasy football content the best you can?
I admit it.
Yeah.
I admit that I have a bias. I admit that um, I don't like the Giants or I don't like Washington or I don't like the Eagles because I'm a Cowboys fan. But at the same time, I think people start to appreciate the fact that even despite me being a Cowboys fan and um, acknowledging my bias, I don't let it get in the way of giving good content when it comes to fantasy football. Because I did it. Matter of fact, I did it last year. Um, Jalen Hurts before the season started. Everybody had questions about whether or not he was going to be able to take the next step, whether he could be a top end quarterback because you saw what he was able to do in his first season starting.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people were, even Eagles fans were kind of on the fence of what he could do. So I took that as an opportunity to acknowledge my bias and just go out there and be like, look, man, I think he can be a top end fantasy football producer. Here's why. I have maybe a couple videos I did on my TikTok channel and YouTube about that, and then I went into threw out a couple tweets as to why I think that he could do that, and then they went out and signed AJ Brown, and it was like,
Yeah.
okay, now we just need him to be a better passer because we know he can run. So
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes it's not hard. It's not that difficult because it's like I want people to win more than I want them to know that I hate the whoever it is. So I
Yeah.
even if they don't, if like I said, even if they don't like me because I'm a Cowboys fan, if they still listen to me because I'm helping them win, that's a dub for me. I'll take that.
Yeah. My thought process on like helping people is if I able to actually help one person actually win their league, of all the people I talk to, like that's money in the bank as far as I'm concerned. I'm like, I'll call it a day. I'm like, listen, might not have been the best year for me, but like I help somebody actually be successful. Like that's what,
Exactly.
because like you'll get random DMs and messages all the time, and people will be asking certain questions about whatever format or whatever, right? I'm like, okay, like what's the context, blah blah blah, and like I'll try my best to understand where they're coming from. And sometimes I'll be like, listen, I'll be simple with this and be straightforward. Take the player you want. Like this is who I recommend, and then if they start disagreeing with me, I'll be like, listen, if you're happy with that player, take them. Like it's okay. Like if you have the gut feeling, then go with it. I'm giving you recommendations. You don't always have to listen to me. I'm not saying my word is gospel because I'm gonna be wrong too. I could be like, hey,
Exactly.
Kelsey 101, and you miss it. It's like, yeah, it's like you have to be careful, right? So you have to. I think it's up to us to kind of acknowledge that and be, not as biased like we're talking about, but at the same point, provide the good content because that's what it's all about. And if they get the players they want, they get the players they want. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious for you, how do you define and measure success? Since we were hitting that a little bit as a content creator, what would you have like thresholds you hit, or what do you consider basically success as a content creator?
Right now, it's just um, the amount of reach that I have. I measure success based on engagement. whether people are coming to me to see, not just to see me do content, but actually listen to the advice that I have. And like you pointed out in your earlier comment, if I can help you win your league, that's my success. And I genuinely believe that, because I could have 10,000 followers and 5,000 of them could be bots. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So the number, it looks good, but if the engagement isn't matching up with the amount of followers I have, then it's kind of pointless. But if I get the followers and I get the engagement and I'm being helpful and they're telling me, hey, this is good advice, or this is something that I was thinking about too, and we're kind of on the same wave, that's a win for me. That's how I feel I measure my success as a fantasy football content creator. If I'm getting the engagement and I'm getting those people that are coming to me and saying, hey man, I need your thought on, or I need your help with, or something to that nature, and they want to take my advice, thumbs up.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're successful, it's a track record you're laying out too, right? Like
Hmm.
consistently see it, so people would be like, "Listen, I didn't agree with them, but they were right last year. They were right the year before. Like, I'm going to go back to this person because I believe in what they're doing, or they can at least understand your process, even if you were necessarily right, but like you're like the process was correct. It's like give it time.
And you made me think of one more thing,
Yeah.
and I think that's I think that's a part of it that I've seen some in the community do, and I don't want to do that. If you make a bad take, do not delete your bad takes.
Yeah.
That's why it to me it shows that you're being genuine. You are not going to get every take right. And if you have somebody that you're listening to or you follow and they say or they pretend like they're getting everything right, they're not. It's humanly impossible to get every single take right. It doesn't happen. So when you make those bad takes, and they some of them I know I got some stinkers. I know I got
Oh
some
yeah.
stinkers, but I'm not going to delete them, because for every bad one that I have, and people come at me and oh, you suck, you suck. When I get them right, I want those same people front and center. Like, yo, you know what, man? I gotta give it to you, man. You was
Mm-hmm.
you was right about this, and I'll respect that. But you can't be around and every time I get one wrong, oh, you got something to say, but then when I get them right, you quiet. Nah, I want that same energy when I'm right. But don't
Right.
don't delete your bad takes. That's part of the game. You're not going to get everything right.
Yeah, I think you're more hitting on transparency aspect of it, right? Like this is what I do, this is how it is. Like I'm team never delete, so I'm right there with you. Like I got bad ones on there. If you look at my Michael Thomas tweets from last year, where I was like, "Hey, he's gonna be a league winner," crapped out week 3. I'm like, guess what? I was wrong about that. I will happily admit it. So I'm with you. It's part of it. Like no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong. And I think this is something a lot of people need to realize. Like you can't be perfect. We shoot for perfection, but it's a myth. Like you can't be perfect in this space. It's impossible to be that. So you just consistently put in the good effort and put in the good work, and over time you're going to get rewarded. And if those same people like you're talking about are coming in and they like respect, then you won those people over and you won as a content creator. So that's what you're looking for as a content creator. And if you're talking to someone who is looking to become a content creator and they ask you advice for basically creating social media tweets or posts or whatever it is that hit, what kind of advice would you have for people for formulating their content?
Um, well, one thing you have to keep in mind is to be current. Um, Always try and stay up on the latest information so that way you can give your take on what you think about, like the Jonathan Taylor situation. You would want to be up on that. So if you see that that's breaking news, you want to weigh in and add your 2 cents in it. You may end up saying the same thing as someone else, but it's
Mhm.
still your perspective. So just remember that. Um, as far as content creating goes, make sure you have a schedule, because it's very easy to be overwhelmed with the content that comes out, because some days it may be slow and then other days it may be boom 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 boom, a whole bunch of stuff going down, and you want to be able to jump in and add to that. So you just have to set a time for how you're going to do things. Like for me, I got wife and kids. I can't always do content, or can't always do content while they're up. So I always try and put my windows to be able to do things probably before I go to bed. So that way I get to maximize the most time that I have to get things done. Um, and then as my last tip, you have to have a good group of apps. your phone is probably going to be your best source to get content done because you're never going to be in front of your computer when stuff goes down. So
Mhm.
have a good phone, iPhone, high-end Android phone. Make sure you got your CapCuts, your Twitter downloaders, your YouTube downloaders. Have those things on your phone, and then you'll be able to push out content. And one more thing. Make sure that you create templates. And I know it sounds like, oh, how would I do that? If you see something that you like that maybe somebody else did, try and maybe take a few things from that and add your own twist to it. But make it as a template for yourself. So that way, if breaking news comes out and you have a breaking news way of doing things for your content, you can just go back to that, change it around a little bit, and then put it out quickly. That way, you're not sitting there for a half an hour to an hour like me when I first started trying to get content out and the breaking news wave is already passed. So just some tips right there.
Yeah, that I think you're hitting perfectly on the process part of it, where people jump in and they're just overwhelmed because there's so much. Like you're like, how do well? I gotta edit this. I gotta get this platform. I gotta get this app. I gotta get Canva. I gotta get CapCut, Capwing, and like all you realize all of a sudden you have like 20 apps. You're like, oh my goodness. So
Hmm.
yeah, maximizing your time with efficiency is so crucial. Because I first started and I was the opposite of that. I was like trying to do all these things with no process and no really like time set up, so it would just be way too chaotic. And then editing on top of it, I'd be spending 8 hours. And I'm like, I don't got 8 hours to
Oh,
do it.
oh, oh.
You know what I'm saying? I'd be like, I get pulled away because I had like a newborn. It was just, yeah, it was a disaster. I don't recommend that for anyone. So 100% have a process and make sure you have the time set up to take advantage of that. So if you
Hmm.
don't, you might want to like be careful of how you dip your toe in. Don't don't take on more than you can handle. But I had to find out the hard
Exactly.
way, unfortunately. um, let's kind of hit on your video quality because it's high. It's like pretty high up there as far as the production value. So I was curious. Can you speak to the time and the effort that more is your inspiration to make that level of quality with your videos?
um, Good lighting. No, I'm just playing. Um, I think for that's why I said earlier about having a good smartphone because you're going to be using you're 9 times out of 10 you're going to be using that to start with. You're not going to come out with a brand new camera unless you've already been doing things like photography. So your smartphone is where you're going to use or get or create most of your content from the beginning. So you want to make sure you have a good quality camera, a good quality front facing camera, and if you're not sure how you need to have your settings, there's a bunch of people on YouTube who have already broken that kind of thing down. And all you need is one or two videos, and it doesn't have to be a 20-minute one. There are plenty of content creators that are just content creators. They just that's what they do. So they've used smartphones, they've used lavalier mics and all that stuff. So you can go on YouTube and check out some of those videos. And if there's one particular guy that you like, hit the subscribe button and you'll be able to stay up to date on how they do things. And sometimes they'll be able to respond in the comments too. So that's one thing that I try to do as far as content.
Yeah, I respect that 100%. There's I think for people, a lot of people get worried about the money aspect of it. There is some stuff might not be as good quality, but it's still high quality for cheaper. So if you're on the budget train, like you could still find good stuff. So don't feel like you have to buy the top tier stuff if you can't afford it. There is levels to this stuff, and you could still find like microphones for cheaper or cameras that work well. They might not be, it might be 90% where it's good enough, right? But do what you can afford and do that. If you can afford the good stuff, it's going to show up in your product. So if you're able to get like those nice cameras, the nice lighting, the nice microphones, like you notice that when you're editing it, you don't have the issues and stuff like that. So 100%.
Yeah. And one more thing for when you try and do your content videos, make sure you got a spot in your house that's maybe well lit, that's not too big where you have an echo or something like that that gets picked up in your content and use that as your place to where you make your content. Even if it's something small, or like maybe a 15-second or 20-second video. If you have a space in your phone, maybe you got a man cave, that's a plus. If you got a man cave or something like that, or you may be a woman and your bedroom is probably the best place in your house that's decorated, well lit, and comfortable, that should be your place. And it's not too big where you're picking up an echo. That's where you should probably be starting your content. Because I've seen a lot of men and women, when they do content, there's a specific place that they constantly do their content in. And it makes sense because maybe those factors are why part of the reason why their content is good, because before they even open up their mouths, you see where they're at and how, if it looks janky or it looks dank, you're like, man, I'm scrolling, I'm out of here. But if it looks good, you already won part of the battle by captivating them. Now the next part is, what are you talking about?
Yep. It's more about being comfortable yourself and wherever you're at. So if whoever it is that's making that content, if they're comfortable, it comes through. And if you're in a spot where you're not comfortable, like, we're gonna pick on that vibe. And so find a spot wherever that is. Like, I've seen people in their car, like, they just make car content and they're super successful, right? So if it's your car, that works too. But just find that one spot is what we're talking about. I think that's the best way to go about it, because you want to be comfortable. You want people to enjoy your content. You don't want people picking up on like super nervous energy or having like a dog run. You know what I'm saying? Like all that stuff. So yeah, like, just come in with a plan, I think, is the best way for myself. On the flip side, what are some of the more common mistakes you see people in the fantasy football industry make when they're doing content?
Now that's a tough one. If I had to say a mistake, it probably will go back to what I said earlier. Just making sure that you're relatable to your content. Meaning, if you get things wrong, don't try and hide from the fact that you got something wrong. I think people really appreciate the genuine aspect of a person outside of the content. Meaning, they're watching you believe in what you're talking about. So if you don't believe in what you're talking about, or you're deleting things because you got something wrong, to me that says you didn't believe in the first place, because you got rid of the evidence that showed that you said that you believed in this, and now it's gone. So I think just making sure that you're standing 10 toes on what you're talking about. If you believe that X player is going to be through the roof, and you've explained why, and you've articulated it and showed data to support your theory, then if it doesn't go right, or he gets hurt for whatever reason, that's not a L. That's just how it goes. That's how sports and fantasy football go. So just be genuine to the content that you create, and I think people will pick up on
that. To hit on that point a little bit more, I've seen people who are successful in the space go back to their old takes that they got wrong and purposely use that as a learning tool to like broadcast for people, right? So like, they're like, all right, this is why I did this. I was wrong, but I learned from it, right? And you see people growing through that. So there's ways to use all of your content, and that's one way to do it. Like, be transparent, let people see it, and like, hey, you can see from this point in here, from 2020 to like 2023 or whenever you started, right? You can see someone growing as a creator. So if you show that to the people, I think they're going to respect it, because I know I respect it to see that from people.
Yep.
Now, to more jump onto the negative aspect of social media, because it is part of it, and you are someone who deals with all the fandom aspect. How do you consistently go through that and not let it personally affect you as a content creator? Like, how are you able to deal with that and not let it kind of infiltrate you and put you into a negative space yourself?
Strongly exercising the block button. That's what it's there for. I personally have a line. I like talking sports, period. I like talking football, especially. If you can't continue the conversation in a football or stay on topic, and you start getting personal, you start taking shots and all that stuff, I'm gonna block you, because I don't have to deal with that. And you can go out and say, oh, he blocked me, he couldn't handle it. No, that wasn't it. I don't have to put up with that. If you can't, or you have the inability to not stay on topic on the conversation, to me, when you start doing that, that's an automatic win for me, because now you've ran out of things to say to back up or support your thesis that you began the conversation with. So now that you're out of ammunition, you're done. So I don't have to put up with people taking personal shots. I've had people say things about my wife, and I don't, for Twitter, I don't really put my family on there. That's not why I have it. But every now and then, I'll say something appreciative about my wife, or my kids did something that was like, I really want to talk about this. And then people will, take pictures and stuff and try and turn it into something else. I ain't got time for that. That's not why I get on Twitter. So I will be hitting the block button. I will be hitting the mute button. You can go on about your day and talk about me, but I don't got nothing. I don't have to worry about that. So you got to exercise that block button. If people, and you have your own personal line, your line might not be the same as mine, but nobody has to put up with negative comments and ignorance. Bye.
Yeah, I sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
no, you good.
I think that it's all about crafting your timeline and however you want to craft it. So whatever you're comfortable with as a creator, do that. So if you're like if you don't want to deal with it, you can mute, you can block, and you can move on with your day. If you want to deal with it, feel free. Like it's all about whatever works for you as the individual. I think is the best way to look at it because it works for you, and then you're able to focus on your content and not get in the weeds and deal with all this nonsense. But if somebody comes from my family, I'm gonna be like, yo, you like I'm done with this. Like that's crossing a line. Like you don't got to go there. I'll take the shot for myself. Sure, you want to come at me?
Yeah,
that's cool. When you get bringing to other people that I care about, like, nah, we're not gonna go there. Like,
you
immediately get it. Yeah, like we're just gonna move on. Be like, nah, man, see you later. Like I don't want to deal with that. Just because, how would you feel like if they flip it on the other person? Like, and a lot of these people are trolls, so that's like what they're going for, right? But like
the burner accounts and all
exactly that. Right. If somebody posted their address or however it is, they'd be like, oh crap, like I don't want that. So yeah, it's just you just got to make it for yourself.
Indeed.
Now, this is something I know a lot of us struggle with. I struggle with it too. How do you balance creating content with maintaining a healthy like work-life balance, as it's called, like healthy balance outside of the content?
I'll admit that in the beginning it was difficult because, like I said, I have a wife, I have 2 kids, they're in school. I cook. I like to cook, so I get the dinner started. My wife comes home, she does homework, so it's a lot about scheduling. And me personally, I'm a fly by the seat of your pants kind of guy, so I don't hold to a lot of schedules. So my wife was a big part of being able to help me maintain that because she had all of our regular day-to-day stuff structured. So when she came home, we would tag out, I would get dinner started, she would help the boys with homework. If we had any other things to do before then, getting them cleaned up, getting them ready for the following school day, that's how we balanced out our regular life. So then if I had time left during the day, that's when I would try and get some content done. And then during the day, my job allows me some flexibility to be able to get content done. And that's why I said having templates makes your content creation easier to do because I don't have to spend the half an hour to 45 minutes to create a template, or maybe even an hour has now been cut down to about maybe 10, 15 minutes because now I have templates for what I want to talk about and it's easier to get out. And going across multiple platforms, you have tools that help you do that too. So when you discover those, like Hokel is an app that I use, I can get on to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook all at once just from that app. So, and then I'll post separately on TikTok and etc. But having a schedule to be able to do that, and that allows you to balance out what you're doing for your family as opposed to and your fantasy football.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm very much not a plan person, so like I would just go do stuff. But like as I jumped in the space, I was like, this is not working. I'm taking way too much time. It's killing my day. It's running into my time with my family. So I was like, I gotta do something. And my wife is very much similar. She plans stuff out, so she's a lot better at that than I am. So we kind of came with a decision like, all right, let's do this. Let's set up this time here. You have this window here, you know. So we planned it out, and it's made my life so much better. Like I'm not so stressed out. Like, oh, I don't have enough time to do everything, right? So yeah, it's plan your time out. If you structure it, you can, and obviously it's life. Stuff gets in the way. It doesn't always going to go according to plan, but making it as easy on yourself as possible, I think is the best way to go about it. It makes it so much easier. Unless you really want to spend, 8 hours making that video, feel free to do it. But you know what I'm saying? Like personally, I don't got 8 hours to do it. So
I'm good where I'm at. I don't want to go backwards.
Exactly right. So how would you recommend people who are new in the space and more just can just hit on content creation, social media? How would you recommend them trying to build a bigger following so they kind of gain a foothold as an analyst or content creator?
You have to be consistent. That's why we've said it multiple times. You have to have a schedule for what you want to do, and it allows you to be consistent in that avenue. For example, during the summer, it's easier for me to get out more content, more videos, more planned and edited content for the summer. Then I see a spike. For me, I see a spike in engagement. I see a spike in views, likes, etc. And I try and build off of that. So based on my schedule, I'll try and get four to five videos done. It may be something I've seen from training camp that I want to share. I'll do maybe 2 audios and then 1 textile video, and then I have my 5. Then I might do some, some personal videos. Maybe
Mhm.
there's something I've seen, maybe a ranking that I didn't like, or somebody's talking about the Cowboys. I want to explain why X, Y, and Z. Those count too. So that's added content, and that's just maybe a few minutes, if that, because you're making the video yourself. And then if you want to add like screenshots and all that stuff, maybe a minute or two. So it's just on how you want to do things. But that's how I try and do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. If like I've talked to a few people through this series, and I've noticed a lot of people kind of set up their content in that way, where if you're able to backlog some of your content, where you can do a bunch at once on time, and then you slowly release them, you give yourself a little bit more time window. And some of the breaking news stuff, that's impossible. Like you can't really do that. You can't do a JT piece 4 days later, but some of the stuff, right? Like you can kind of space it out, so you give yourself a little bit more time. So if you take advantage of those windows, and like this is the same story we're talking about, time management, having a plan, being effective with it, it makes your life so much easier. So I completely agree with all of that.
You reminded me of something. There was a content creator on TikTok who was explaining that, and she mentioned having a day where, if you're not like, if maybe during your schedule you have downtime after 6 o'clock every day, and it's just your time. That's, you can sit back and watch TV, you can play video games, whatever. But that, for whatever reason, that particular time of day is your downtime. Make that time, if you can, make that time to add more content creation. Use it as a way to, like you said, build up storage content, so that way you can put stuff out throughout the day or throughout the week, or however you want to dull it out. But now you've had time to build maybe 5, 6, 7 videos, and you put out 2 a day or 3 a day, however you want to do it. And now you have content that's already done, ready to go out whenever you want to put it out. So
Yeah, I
that's
think
a good strategy too.
that's a great lesson to learn from that TikTok person, because like consistency is so key in all of this. Because you have, as people who consume the content, like I know I've consumed content in the past where people release stuff at a certain time and it's consistent. I'm like, all right, I know this is going to drop here. I'll check in at that time. So if it doesn't happen, like I've done this before, where I was like, I'm doing a series this time, this day, and then I miss it, and somebody messages me, and I'm like, son of a, I'm like, yeah, you're right, that's my fault. Like I screwed that up. So it's just about, and it'd be me being more mindful of being consistent, and it shows off, and people respect that. Like if you're able to hit those consistently, like that's a win as far as I'm concerned. And then kind of lastly, what are your ultimate goals as a content creator, and how do you plan on achieve those goals?
I would really like, one of my biggest goals is I want to see how far I can take my podcast personally. And then my secondary goal is I would love to be able to get on to somebody like NFL fantasy, ESPN, Matthew Berry type stuff. If I would love to be able to do that, and then turn my, I guess for lack of a better word, my hobby into a full-time thing, because this is something that I wish I had discovered earlier when I was younger. And I started playing fantasy a long time ago. Like what was the year Robert Griffin got drafted?
Oh, so
That was
like
like
2012, 2013? Yeah, I think it's the
that's
same year Russell got drafted, right? So 2012, probably.
yeah, that was the very first year that I played. And I wish that I had discovered fantasy football even before that, because it's so much fun when you have home leagues and you get to talk trash with your friends and compare IQs, and everybody think that they're the genius in the room. I mean, even myself. So it's fantasy football is something that, like, it's a guy, not a guy's thing, but for me, my friends, men and women, it's just something that we like to do. And it's something I wish I had got into a little bit earlier. But those are my two biggest goals. If I could get on doing something on the higher end, and then seeing how far I can take my own podcast, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's the goal for a lot of us in this way. And even if you're not able to do that, but if you put your best foot forward and see where it takes you, it might take you down a completely different path, which you didn't realize, because a different door might open. So like by consistently putting that effort in and making the content like you're doing, you're slowly opening doors to, it could be anywhere. I've seen people in this space go to completely different areas where they're like, I was a content creator for fantasy, and then they branch into something massively different, but they get a full-time job, or it's like so it's interesting to see where this door can lead you in this space. So I'm open to it. Like obviously I would love to do that. I don't have the time to do it right now, but like that's a goal for myself as well too. But yeah, we're all in it because we love fantasy football, or the majority of us, at least, because some people just, they do data and stuff. But yeah, like I've been playing this game forever too, so it's a lot of fun. But I want to thank you for coming on, man. It was a blast chopping it up with you. Like it was a joy. I learned some things from you. Yeah, it's good. Why don't you tell the people where they can find all of your content at?
All right, so you can follow me personally at hype_Phinest. That's PH, not F, because despite me being a Cowboys fan, I still do rep Philly. So the PH is kind of from that. So it's PHINEST. You can follow my podcast, the Fantasy's Finest podcast. Same thing with the PH instead of the F for Finest. We're on across all social medias: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We just got on Threads not too long ago, the Instagram social media. So we're all over there. You can find the podcast on Odyssey, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're more than likely on there. So you hit the subscribe button. I always tell people, like, leave us reviews, even if you don't like that episode. I'm not foreign to criticism. I always like to get that, because you may hear or listen to something or see something that I've done, and you're like, yo, man, I don't really feel like that's the move because X, Y, and Z. And I'll take it under advisement. I'm like, all right, well, maybe there are more people that don't like it this way. Let me try and tweak it to make it so that they are more enjoyable to the content I'm putting out. So I'm not above that. So, I mean, but those are the handles. You can check us out there.
I love that little nugget you just laid out, because yeah, it's like we want the content for people to enjoy it. So if people don't enjoy it for a particular reason, like I gotta
know,
exactly like you're saying, right? Yeah, and if you don't tell me, I might not know, because I'm listening to it, but different ears, different perspectives. So yeah, 100%. But follow this man on all the platforms he just listed, like and subscribe, all of that good stuff. Support him, because that's what we're all about. But yeah, this is I think the 10th edition of the Getting to Know series. It was a pleasure chopping it up with you, and yeah,
nice.
Take care, folks.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.